Welcome to Rural Classroom Live. I'm Albert Liu. Here today, joined by Matthew and Maxim Smith. They are Doug Casey's co-authors on his new book, The Preparation. Guys, welcome to the stream. How are you?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having us.
For sure. Thank you.
It's great to have you both on. Had Doug Casey on last week to help launch the new book. I'm enjoying it. I am not all the way through it, but I'm enjoying it quite a bit. And I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about the program that you put together here. But before we start, I just want to start with you, Matt, because you know, I've been wanting to meet you for quite a while, as we mentioned just before the show. Matthew is the co-host of Casey's Take and also runs Doug Casey's Files community. Matt, you want to talk a little bit about your relationship with Doug, and then also I want to talk a little bit about your history, since this show is about education. I just want to get a history of your experience with education and how that set up the project that you ultimately ended up doing with Doug.
Well, let's see. So let me start with Doug, my relationship with Doug. I actually first I was a fan of Doug Casey, as many viewers probably are, in the 2000s. And because of his urging, I thought in 2007, anticipating the financial crisis, I thought I should go to Buenos Aires and look at apartments. And I never met Doug before that, but coincidentally, one evening as I finished, my days shopping, touring different apartments, I walked out of my hotel for an evening walk, and as I walk out of the hotel lobby, I literally run into him as he's walking by on the sidewalk. And that's how I met Doug. So that would be 2007. And we've become friends. We've done some interesting things together. You know, one of Doug's personal hobbies is trying to reform these countries. He thinks that, turn them into the next Singapore or whatever. So, one of the first things I did with Doug was we went to a plow a couple of times, and we made it pretty far. We almost convinced them, actually. I think we were close, but so that was way back then. And lots of, Doug and I, luckily, when I moved to Buenos Aires, eventually I was like 8 blocks away from him. So it made it convenient to see him regularly. And then we lived in Colorado, and Doug spent his summers in Aspen. And so conveniently, it was easy for me to see him during the summers. And yeah, so I have a long history with Doug, really. And he's my personal hero, among other things, and definitely has helped shape the way I think about the world, along with a lot of others, I think. So that's that. Now, for my education wise, I'm a college dropout. So I'm like the polar opposite of Doug, who has like a superior education, from an excellent institution. He describes it as a misallocation of his time and his parents' capital, I think. For me, I only went for 3 semesters, dropped out after 3, and it just wasn't for me. It was obvious. And so because at that stage, you're basically unemployable. I became an entrepreneur. I did everything from house painting, and eventually I started a digital ad agency in the early 2000s, and that was pretty successful. And I guess the business, other than the stuff I do with Doug now, which I guess you could call a business, the most recent thing that I've done is that you can see publicly is Royalty Exchange, which is this marketplace for music royalties that we launched that in 2016. So I'm no longer involved in running it day to day, but still the majority shareholder. So I've just started businesses. If you leave me alone for too long, that's what I'll end up doing. I don't know how to paint. I have no talents. So leave me alone in a room for too long, and that's what I'll end up doing.
Okay, cool. And so from what I take it of the timeline, that must have been you meeting Doug, must have been around the time Maxim was born, or just before?
It was 2 years after he was born. I know exactly when it was. His sister is 2 years younger than him, and it was in October of 2007 when he was 2. Yeah, because my daughter was 2 weeks old when I went down, which was not exactly a popular decision, and I knew it was a bad idea to kind of leave with a daughter who's 2 weeks old. But I just felt the urgency of the financial crisis coming, so I felt like I really got to go. So yeah, I don't remember exactly when it was.
It's so funny. I did almost the exact same thing. I went to Argentina with my son, was probably like 11 months old or something. Again, not a popular decision, but something that I really benefited from. Let's talk about ideology, Matt. Can you say that there's a driving ideology behind sort of this course that you've laid out? Is there a religious ideology? Is there a political ideology? What's the sort of the North Star?
I'd say there's a Renaissance ideology. The Renaissance period is marked by a rediscovery of ancient wisdom, specifically the virtues. And if there's one guiding star in the whole thing, it's that. It's how do you make a man? How do you take a young person and help shape them into the man they could be? And the way that education works now, fundamentally, is its promise is that it's going to make you economically viable. Whether that's you go into the military, or you do trades, or you go to college. The whole hope is that you become financially independent, not wealthy, but meaning you can pay your own rent. And I think that's a really shitty goal. I mean, I'm not saying it's something that obviously everyone should achieve, but it's not a worthwhile pursuit in and of itself. So we try and frame that within the book. Well, what is a worthwhile pursuit, and one that really I think does motivate young people is, trying to become the man you want to become. And I think you'll go through a lot more in life with an orientation around that than you would just try and be able to pay your own rent. I mean, it should be a byproduct of it. And the other thing is that, when Doug actually first pitched me on this book 12 years ago, he said, one day I was taking him from his house to lunch up in Aspen. He said, "Hey, Matt, I wonder if you'd want to do this with me. I want to write a book called The Renaissance Man." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, tell me more about it." And he said, "Well, the 3 most important verbs in every language are be, do, and have. And I want the book to be about that." And I said, "Well, can you explain what you mean?" He's like, "Well, I'm really not sure." And I said, "Oh, well, okay, well, yeah, maybe, I don't know." And he brought it up every boy, I don't know, every 2 years at least, he'd bring it up again. And it always sounded like, I mean, I've heard Doug, he's written several books. And so he always referred to it as a lot of brain damage and there's no money in books. So, you know, it didn't, that I would hear, let's do this book. And it's a lot of brain damage. And so I always passed. I wasn't interested until he was 17, coming up on 18. And I could see in him the anxiety about the future, the lack of, the uncertainty. Like there was no solid plan. I mean, because I'm not a college graduate, he didn't grow up under a household where there was any kind of propaganda around college is the key to success. And that might have been, in a way, it might have accelerated his anxiety about it, because at least then he would have thought, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. So I should go in that direction. But I was very ambivalent on it. I was like, yeah, you know, it could be okay, could not be okay. And anyway, so once I saw him in that situation and I felt it, I got back with Doug and I said, I think we should let's flush this out a little bit more. And what flushing it out really meant a couple of ideas on a napkin. That's where it started. And and obviously now it's a pretty well structured program.
Okay, Maxim, I want to ask you something, because this reminds me of a conversation I had, or a conversation I was listening to. I can't remember if I was actually hosting it, but with Jeffrey Tucker. You guys know Jeffrey?
I do.
Jeffrey Tucker. Okay, so well-known, anarcho-libertarian guy. And we were talking about kids at one point, and he said something that kind of resonated with me, because he said like, when my daughters were young, like I didn't want to indoctrinate them with any ideology, even my own. Like I wanted them to find their way by themselves. And I kind of felt the same way. But then Jeffrey says, yeah, but then when they grew up, they told me, Dad, you were trying to kind of be low key about it, but we knew you were an anarchist all along. The whole thing. And I think the same's true with sort of my kids. I tried not to, be too outspoken about it, but even going the other way, actually. And I don't know if it actually worked. So the question, Maxim, for you is, given your father, what he just said about ideology being sort of the Renaissance man, that archetype, how much of that sort of seeped through while you were young, versus how much of it did you just find out about it when he started this book project?
It's a good question. I don't think it was necessarily the Renaissance ideology that existed before the preparation. It was more so just it was almost like a background focus on character and morality, which is the main part of the Renaissance ideology. Actually, that's where it all stems from. That's the root of it. Because I always remember him talking about character and virtue and morality in ways that weren't exactly, at least it didn't seem to me, direct. Like it didn't seem to me like you were trying to instill, like force something into my mind. It was just more subtle. It was a constant, subtle thing. Whether that be talking about ancestors who were very interesting and obviously virtuous people, creating a family crest, for example, something like that. But I think it shifted a little bit, and things were added on to it with the start of the preparation, because it wasn't just based around the character and virtues. That's when it stemmed out to capabilities as well, which is the remainder of the Renaissance ideology. So I think that's how it changed over time.
Matt, you talk a lot about books, things that influence, people that influenced you, but like Doug, for instance. But you also talk in the book about your own childhood and how that was kind of tough. And you can just tell that must have left a huge imprint on you. How much of that was part of Maxim's early development? Maybe just share what you want to about your childhood, and then talk about maybe how that was a driving factor and sort of what Maxim perceived as his childhood experience.
Sure. I mean, I had you can learn from good examples or you can learn from bad examples. And I had pretty shitty examples. So I grew up very poor. Maxim did not. And, And that's been one of my major objectives, is to make sure that my kids did not grow up in that situation. My dad was kind of a non-existent non-entity. But that taught me a lot, actually. It taught me like how, to be the anti my own father, essentially. So I think it was, in the book, like, I'm a huge fan of Stoicism. Stoicism comes through in the book, as you can see in all the parts that I wrote related to it. And, there's this basic idea that, like, everything does indeed happen for a reason. And like you're put in particular situations so that you can do the thing that must come next. And so I have only real gratitude, honestly, for the situation I grew up in. I think it was really good for me to be who I am, and I like who I am.
I think that's a fabulous example on how to deal with adversity. Maxim, what do you have any comments on? Obviously, you know what your father wrote in the book, and you know him probably better than anyone, or as well as anyone. Just that attitude. It is very stoic, Matt. Just sort of accepting what life throws at you, Maxim. Is that one of the lessons that you take from this?
Yeah, for sure. And I think if we're tying it directly to the preparation, you are constantly doing new things that are very difficult, doing it willingly, instead of letting these random life circumstances happen to you that are going to be difficult anyway. And because you're doing it willingly, back to back to back, these new things, you develop, I think, naturally a stoic attitude of facing difficult things. I think it ties in directly with the preparation.
Okay, so let's get to the book then. One of the things that jumps out immediately when I read the book is that it's written from a man's perspective. And this must have been, like, you and Doug must have had a conversation about this very early on and make that decision. I want to ask you why you made that decision. Should we just be feeding our daughters into the college machine? Is 4 years wasted effort and a huge amount of debt a good thing for women? Why did you decide? Why did you decide to make it kind of a male focused program?
Yeah, well, I don't think. Well, I'm one of these people who believes that there's a difference between boys and girls. I guess, count me as I guess a radical these days to think something like that. I mean, I have a son and a daughter. My daughter today is at the same age Maxim was, essentially, at the time when he began this. It began as our beta tester, our guinea pig, and trying to put this all together. And I'm just as concerned about her and making sure she's set up with a good path that she feels good about, in the same way I was about Max. But this book, essentially, in its most root form, is my best effort to give him the information and the direction that he would need at this point in his life, or specifically at the point where he was 2 years ago. And talking to him, talking in a gender neutral way, I don't think would have accomplished the same thing. I don't think it would have connected with the young men that we hope to connect with if I'd tried to make it gender neutral. I mean, girls have different hopes, fears, aspirations, and anxieties, and I think they're fundamentally different and than a young man is. I mean, what motivates a young man is different. So in a broad way of looking at it, the book is designed to make the young man, give him power, give him the power to shape his environment, the power to control and master himself, the power to develop capabilities. And in a weird way, like, women already kind of have power at that age, and so like that dynamic and that pursuit of power, and that the drive to put yourself through adversity, I think is just different for a boy. I think the book, fundamentally, if you go through this process, and as Maxim is 2 years through it, there's still 2 years left, but it's a hero's journey, really. And I mean, it does feel like, it looks like, maybe you can speak to this better than me, like a rite of passage. And I think that that's not exactly the same thing that a young woman would need. They need something that's very important, not less important in any way, but it has to be communicated a little bit differently. I do think a lot of the specific cycles, like most of the book is devoted to exactly what to do. And I think a lot of that is directly transferable. I think those girl could do that stuff and would just be just as impressive for a young lady to do that. Many of those things, but to connect, so a young man would read it and be like, I got a text message from a father who, read the book, was trying to get his son to read it, sent me an email, was saying, yeah, he doesn't really listen to me though, and I don't try any tips, and maybe I can have him talk to Max. And then he sent me this text message this morning of his son to him, and it was his son said, God, what exactly he said? He said, thanks for buying me the preparation. I started reading it last night.
It's really powerful.
It's really powerful. I couldn't put it down. That's what the young man said. Now, if I'd written it in a gender neutral way, I don't think it would have worked.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Great answer, Matt. I think, to your point that people need different things. If there was a volume 2 that was targeted towards young women, it would be different. Do you think you could write it, Matt, or would someone else have to write it? And I want to add that Doug has a lot of female followers as well. He's not just appealing to the male audience. He has a lot of different followers. Would you be the one to write it, or would someone else have to write it?
I expect that it's something that my wife will do with me, probably, to get her input on, but at the same time, I do think you got to have some touchstones with a woman on some parts of it, absolutely. But I also have to say I've been putting a lot of thought into it over the last 3 months, and I've asked every woman who says, "Well, you got to have one of these for girls," and there's a lot of them that said it. I've said, well, what would you recommend? These people have read it, and I haven't gotten great ideas from them. Even understanding the distinction, like what's the woman's equivalent of a hero's journey? What is that? There is something there. That there's this coming of age thing. There is something there. What is it? And I think I've got an idea. Still not fully fleshed out, but it didn't come from a woman. I'll say that honestly. So yeah, I don't know. It'll come. I mean, I expect we'll end up doing it, and my wife will probably be the one who helps me with it mostly.
Very interesting. Okay, let's get to one of the early chapters here, where you ask, or you talk about being competent, confident, and dangerous. I also recall Doug talking about this book project many years ago. And incidentally, I think he found the perfect co-author in you, Matt, because the way it came out, I think it channels sort of what Doug feels is important, but also has the benefit of a parental perspective, which is very important. When he first mentioned this, and I don't know if he used the exact words competent, confident, and dangerous, but I immediately thought of Simon Bolivar, because his history is very interesting. That the man was sort of orphaned. Both of his parents died of tuberculosis, and then he was, I think he was adopted by a relative who really just wanted his money, the family fortune, and they ended up shoveling him off to some school run by a guy named Simon Rodriguez. And this guy has this program that is very much like what you're creating here. I mean, very rigorous, packed with like sort of physical activity, a lot of enlightenment reading. And you want to talk about competent, confident, and dangerous. Bolivar's
Yeah,
just ask the king of
to create the leftist revolutionaries here. What we mean by dangerous mostly, I mean, you should be physically capable of defending yourself, obviously, and that's a big part of it. And Max can talk about his experience, what he's done with that so far. But I think really what's dangerous, what's more dangerous than a person who thinks for themselves, who knows who they are, who can draw a line in the sand and say no, That's the most masculine thing you can do, I think, is actually that alone, not kicking someone's ass or something like that. If you look at all the madness of the last several years, I think you could say if there were more men who actually knew how to draw a line in the sand, I don't think none of this would be going on. So, yeah, that's what we mean by dangerous. We mean really being independent, being independent, an independent thinker, and capable of acting and shaping the world around you.
Dangerous. So dangerous to whom? Does this have a libertarian slant to it? Dangerous to the state? Dangerous to sort of the corporate culture? Dangerous to whom?
Well, I'd say it's dangerous to anybody who might want to coerce you. And of course, that could be the state. Of course, is the number one coercer, anywhere. But it also, but I think it also could be just the system, like certainly corporate employers and things like, and any employer for that matter. I mean, our hope is that people are not employees. That they ultimately are entrepreneurs. Of course, people ultimately choose their own path there, but exactly how they do it. But that if you're dependent upon a paycheck, what's the Nassim Taleb's quote, which is the 3 most addictive substances on earth are heroin, heroin, carbs, and a monthly salary. And I agree with that. Like, a monthly salary is a dangerous thing. It's very easy for you to sort of sit on your haunches and not do anything with that. So, yeah, we prefer people not go that route. We prefer people have choices about how they can create value in the world. And if you have a whole suite of capabilities and you understand how the world works, then it becomes very easy to see how you can be a value creator almost wherever you are.
Okay, so let's get to the nuts and bolts. This is a 2-part book. In part 1, you talk about foundation. This is sort of the thinking. And then you talk about part 2, the action, the doing. So start with part 1. What motivated the choices you made? What were the choices you made there for foundational ideas, and why?
Well, the most important thing, I wanted to explain how the world actually works compared to the way that people think it works. There's this notion of, climbing the ladder to success, this idea that you got to work your way up. I think that's a total lie. And so we just kind of introduced the idea of, we ask the question, like, the life is set up at this set of bars that you're supposed to cross, like ladders you're supposed to climb starting from school, going through this process, being, a good, dutiful student. And high school and all of that. And then ultimately, so finally you can get into university, so that you can finally get into a job. So finally, then you can climb the corporate ladder and move your way up. It's like there's held out this promised land somewhere, but everywhere you go, there's another ladder to climb. And honestly, all of the ultra successful people I know, out of all of the ultra successful people I know, none of them went that way. None of them climbed these ladders. They went about it in an entirely different manner. And so we talk about that in terms of how the world actually works. And, the other thing I think that is really central to the beginning, the first part of the book, is we actually have people, we ask the reader to create a personal code. And it sounds trivial at first, but it's really not. And it's broken down into 3 parts. The first part, and actually, I wish everyone would do this. I think they would do them wonders if they did it. But we're thinking about young men like Max, to think about the things that they do that make them feel small. Other people might not even be aware of it, but they are. The things they do maybe makes them feel a little ashamed when they do it. For instance, Albert, if you invited me to dinner on Friday and I said, "Oh, I can't, I'm busy," it's just a little white lie. I have no plans on Friday. So you say, well, what harm is really caused there? It's not deception, exactly. But I'll say for me personally, it makes me not feel good to do that. Like, I don't like to lie. It makes me feel small when I lie. So for me, one of those, I would set up some rules for myself. I don't like rules in general, but rules for myself that I only expect of myself, I've found incredibly useful. And so the first part of it is we ask them to essentially craft a set of rules for themselves. Set of rules that are based upon reflecting on how they feel when they behave in certain ways. And they're deciding, I'm not going to do that anymore. Again, this might sound trivial, but if you think about a young person here, this is the beachhead. This is the formation of self. This is the part where you stop going with the flow of everyone else around you and just mimicking essentially the conduct of your peers and whatever social influences you have, and instead are deciding that's not for me. I'm not going to do that. And I think so. I just think it's super critical, and very few people have these rules for themselves, but they really should. And for a young person, I think, like I said, it becomes a beachhead. It becomes something that they can start to see. It's the basis of self-esteem, really. To be able to, again, for a man to say no is the most important, is the most powerful manifestation, I think, of masculinity. And the person, then they start to recognize the power of it when they deny themselves. They deny themselves for, future benefit, essentially. They deny. It's kind of this gets into the economics later, but it's basically just thinking about the value of conducting themselves with a long-term focus. I'd like doing things that don't go the easy path. So that's the first part. The second part of the personal code is we introduce them to the ancient virtues, and we say, here's what they are. Those things like courage, hospitality, ancient virtues. And we say, note the ones that call to you, that you sound like, yeah, that'd be cool. Like I would like to be known as a courageous person. I'd like to be known as a person with dignity. These things, that sounds good to me. I like these things. And write those down. And unlike the rules, which it's like a binary thing, it's like, oh, I fell short, I feel a little, I failed or whatever. Virtues is a constant pursuit. It's an aspirational attempt. You could always be more courageous. You could always, maybe you can't always have better dignity, but you could pursue constantly maintaining your dignity throughout your life. So we said those are the two roots of it. And then the third part, the part where you really get the payoff, is when you start adding competencies, adding real skills to that, which as you go through the preparation, they stack up super fast. And when you look back on them, you're like, man, I've done all this stuff. I can do all these things in such a short period of time. And, it builds a solid individual. Because if a fundamental goal with this, remember Doug said, be, do, have, most important verbs in any language. I should explain that. Maybe Doug did already if people saw it. But essentially, everyone is oriented toward have. We're thinking, I'd like to have a nice car. I'd like to have a beautiful mate. I'd like to, have. Everything's have. The problem is that have is a byproduct of do. Do is the operative. Do is the thing that you have control over. Do is how you get, the fruits of your labor. There has to be labor to achieve it. So, but the most important thing fundamentally is the be. It's like who you are, the kind of human you are. Are you somebody that is apart from those that you're surrounded with? What is it that makes you you? And by planting the seeds early on with this personal code, the goal is to basically plant it in the back of their mind as something that, to just keep in their awareness as they go on this hero's journey that's outlined in the book.
I want to turn to Maxim now, and if you're watching and you have any questions for Matt or Maxim about this program, send them in. It's a rare opportunity. We have them both here. Maxim has lived this firsthand, and there must be people out there who have questions about this experience. Maxim, let's talk about the do, because you spent the last 2 years living this. Take us through it. Take us through, how it started and how it's going.
Well, it's hard to start somewhere. There's actually been too much for me to remember, honestly. Literally too much for me to remember. I mean, over the last few years, I've sailed around the Falkland Islands and through the Strait of Magellan, worked on wildfires, became an EMT, was apprenticed to an Uruguayan gaucho, learned how to fix fences, treat and raise cattle, shoe horses, drive tractors. So much.
Learn how to fly a plane.
I forgot about that, and I'm doing that now. Learning how to fly a plane. Well, really learned how to fly a plane. And countless other things besides that. Those are just some of the biggest things.
Play guitar, speak Spanish.
Sure. Yeah. Lots of stuff. It's literally impossible for me to remember everything without having it in front of me, listed in front of me. But it's been very, very good. I think it's probably the best thing that's happened in my life, for sure, without a doubt. Because when I was 17, like my dad was saying, I was completely lost and unsure of what to do. And then starting off with the basic couple lists that Doug gave us that was on the napkin, first thing I did was go to EMT school. And that's where everything started. That's where the preparation completely started from there. But along with that, the be do have thing was introduced. That idea was introduced in the beginning, which was and has been the most important idea throughout the entirety of it. It's been the foundation. So not only have I done a lot of things, but I hope, in just looking back on the past few years, I think my character has improved quite a bit just by making the be a priority as well. So a lot has happened, and I can go into detail about some things if you're curious, but it's too difficult for me to go into everything.
Let me ask some specific questions then. The first thing that came out when I was reading sort of some of the more practical do recommendations you have is that a lot of these things don't have to wait until someone is 18 years old. I have a boy who's turning 12 soon, and I think he should. You really motivated me actually to get involved earlier, which I didn't as much with my older daughter, but I think that just with some gentle nudges, I could be pushing him into some of these activities very early on. I mean, certainly the language, learning the language aspect, which we are already doing, but some of the books which may be beyond his level could be exposed to him indirectly through just the concepts. Maxim, do you think that you would have benefited from some of these activities years earlier than you actually started?
Oh yeah. No, I wish I started a lot earlier. I mean, as an example, you can become a private pilot at 15 before you can
get a driver's license.
Car. So you can start a lot earlier. And of course, like you mentioned, there's the activities like learning an instrument or speaking another language.
Learning to play.
Scuba diving is another thing you can do at a very young age. There's countless things you can do. So I wish I started 3 years beforehand.
Yeah, I do too. That was and that was one thing that was obvious in the book, in the writing of the book, is that we should have started it a lot earlier. What wasn't obvious until after the book came out was all the people that, because most of the people who bought it so far. I mean, it was the thousands of people who bought it so far. Most of them are parents trying. Most 17-year-old kids are not like, could they even buy the book online? Even do they have a credit card? I mean, they're not the buyers. The buyers are the parents or grandparents who are concerned about or want to aid in their loved one's future. And so the parents read it and they're like, I could do this. I could do this now. Or people that are gone through college and it didn't work like they expected it to work. And they see, I could start these things today. So that whole thing was surprising to me. And we've had 3 people, no exaggeration, over 70 that have said, I'm going to do this. So I don't know. I mean, the goal was, in my mind, Maxim and his situation, trying to come up with the right solution for people as a replacement to university. But no doubt it could be started earlier, no doubt at all. And, a lot of people want to do the things in here and much older. I mean, one thing, for example, I should explain the basic structure of this, because it's hard to, it seems like it's all over the place if you don't know the basic structure. We're trying to model 4 years in college. So we divide it into quarters. We call these quarter cycles. Each cycle has an anchor activity. This is like the main event. This is the when he was doing sailing, his first time, by the way, ever sailing at all, it was around the Falkland Islands and through the Strait of Magellan. It's kind of thrown you in the deep end, and literally. And that was an anchor activity. That took 3 weeks of that 3 months. So in some cases, the anchor activity lasts a lot longer than that. In some cases, it's even shorter than that. But that's the central event, and everything else is built around that. And those other things that are built around it immediately, of key importance to Doug in particular, was the academics. He's like, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to know more than one would know by going to university. There are all kinds of classes online available for free or almost free. I mean, Yale's got a whole bunch of their courses online for free. MIT's almost entire course catalog is available online for free. The education is out there if you want it. And we detail exactly where to go and the classes to take and all this stuff. It's all detailed specifically. But so the academics are there. There's a reading prescribed as well. And there's, just like college, there's electives. So, both in the coursework, the academic part and on the reading part, they can follow their own curiosity, and we lay out some options for them, but they can deviate if they want to from that. And then there's 2 other elements. There's activities. These are things that honestly, a lot of them could be an anchor course in and of themselves. You could turn them into that. But for instance, we do have an anchor course where this is one where he's going to do in January. He's going to go to Thailand and study Muay Thai for a couple months. And so, this goes to the dangerous part, right? So we believe you should be involved in some martial arts. But one of the activities is, doing some Brazilian jiu-jitsu or some other martial art, right? So that's one of the activities. So we say specifically allocate a certain amount of time during each of these cycles to activities, and we list all the ones we think are interesting, but there's many more you could choose from for sure. And then finally is this reflection piece, reflection and accountability. It's like you have to set aside time specifically, intentionally to digest what you've learned and to hold it into the way we suggest to do it is to publicly post what you've done that week. That's what Max started doing early on Substack. There's just a list at first of what he'd done that week. And it had built-in accountability around it. I mean, it was, nobody really judging him by it, but he had to post it, and then eventually ended up building thousands of people that are paying attention to it. And so that's a big part of it too. Those are the main components of a cycle. Each cycle is fundamentally different. A lot of the cycles are very hands-on things like EMT. There's a welding one. There's one where you learn to operate heavy equipment. And a lot of these things are skills that have economic value. I'm not saying they're going to make you rich. I mean, being an EMT, usually you're working on an ambulance, making minimum wage. Max did parlay it into something way more valuable than that for a period of time. When he was working on wildfires, he was earning $600 a day, as a EMT on wildfires. So it's things like that. Anyway, so they have economic viability, most of the anchor activities. But then they get into the more abstract, like he's in the entrepreneurship cycle right now. And there's an investing one. There's ones using technology that get into it. So they start off though very, very hands-on, very physical, and they end up getting more abstract over time.
I got a lot of questions, but in the interest of time, I can only get a few more in. So Max, in the book, you talk about sort of some of these traditional paths or other activities that men pursue, and how there's a sort of a group dynamic to it. So, for example, if you go into the military, you're in a group. If you go into a college program, you're very often in a group. And a lot of these trade schools are the same thing. You're in a group. I've experienced that myself, and there's a lot of value to that in the sense that the shared, I guess, challenge, there's a camaraderie that develops that is unequaled. You talk about, people who served in the military together, and then 60 years later or 50 years later, the bond is still there. This is a program you're doing mostly by yourself. And this is a question to first, I guess, Matthew and then Maxim. Matt, is this a deliberate aspect of the course? Meaning, is it a deliberate skill that you wanted to instill to have someone go through this by themselves? Or do you think it would be better for groups of people to do this, together as kind of an ad hoc class? And then Maxim, I'd like you to add to that and just let us know which would you prefer? Which do you think would have been more beneficial?
Well, I'll say I don't think that you can have the hero's journey element unless there's a lot of acting on your own. I don't think that, I was in the Army. I can tell you the group dynamics of it. Maybe sometimes I guess when you're doing the really shitty things, it's nice to know that there are other people suffering with you. And sometimes you can help each other through it. But I wouldn't say that was a hero's journey at all. I would say if I had any of that came much later in my life. And so I think that element has to be there, and that's a big part of it. Like I talked to Tom Dyson, who I'm sure you know about this, and he's like, "Yeah, I want to do this stuff with Dusty." It's his eldest son, and I said, "You got to be careful with that. Like they gotta, for them to be a man in full, they have to have, they come there on their own. That you have to create space for them in order for that to emerge." So that's an important aspect of it. Now, do I think that there are benefits of a group dynamic? Absolutely, I do. For a decade, I ran with an ex-business partner of mine, this liberty and entrepreneurship camp in Lithuania. And we'd have 55 young people, college-age people go through there every year, and it was quite a bonding experience for them. The alumni group from that is super solid, and they have relationships now all over the world, and they benefit from it. So the ideal of this is that, to my mind, is that it's fundamentally an individual pursuit, but there are ways I think we can bring people that are doing this individual pursuit together, maybe for certain cycles that they might do together. And it's certainly just an awareness and of each other. And we have to sell a lot of copies of this and have enough people do it before it would make sense. But to organize some specific things, like maybe there's a cycle or two that we take responsibility for in a facility, and you bring in a group at a time and they go through it together. But fundamentally, life is an individual journey, really. I mean, and I don't think doing it as a group, the best thing it does is it makes you think that you're going the right direction, because you have the confirmation you get from everyone around you is that, we're on the right track. The downside is you can be going totally the wrong direction and believe the whole time you're doing the right thing.
Right. And the forced group structure pales in comparison to inputting yourself into a group willingly. Like if you do that in school, I didn't go to college, obviously, but if I'm measuring my experiences in school, I can't imagine that my social experiences in school, I can't imagine that it would be that much different in college. And I was forced to be in school. And majority of it was just messing around with other people and talking about how everything sucked. That was what it was.
It's like you're talking with your inmates, basically your fellow inmates.
Yeah. And then there's this weird competition, peer competition, where everybody keeps themselves in line. You don't want to step out of line, otherwise you are out of the group. Whereas in the preparation, when you're doing stuff, like I'll use sailing and wildfires as an example, I was inserting myself into odd groups that come naturally instead of being forced groups. Like when you step onto a wildfire and you work for a wildland EMS crew, which is what I did, you are forced to live with a group of people. Of course, you're willingly putting yourself in that position, but you're living with a group of people who you had never met, most likely, for a month plus, possibly. And the relationships you can develop from that are much more, much stronger, much better, much more interesting. And then sailing, you are developing relationships with people of varying ages, of varying skill sets, and they're not just your peers who know as much as you do or less, and have about as much experience as you do or less. For people who are genuine, real people going out and doing stuff that you're getting in close contact with. And that's very different than a forced environment like the trades, even, or school, or the military.
Oh, I think you're muted, Albert.
Sorry. Sorry, I got alarms going off in my office all over the place. Thank you for that. We're running out of time here, so we're going to have to conclude. So I just want to tell people where they can get this book. We have a short link, kc.ruleclassroom.com. There's the book. This is my favorite photo from the book. It's Maxim with a godfather and dad on the tarmac in front of a plane that he presumably just landed himself.
No, you didn't buy that one. This was in Lima, actually. It was in Lima.
Joke. Yeah. I don't think you start on those planes.
Yeah, no.
But it's a good look. So if you're interested in this, please pick up a copy of the book. kc.ruleclassroom.com is where you can get it. Guys, thanks for spending time with me today. We really appreciate it. And I'd like to get you back on the show again sometime.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, thanks, Albert. Really, really appreciate it.
All right. Say hi to Doug for me, guys. Take care. And everyone who joined, thank you very much. If you missed my interview with Doug Casey last week, you can go to ruleclassroom.com. Catch that, as well as numerous other live streams I've done with Rick Rule about natural resource investing. Everyone take care, guys. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
All right, take care.
Thank you.